这个故事如果你听起来不累，那么你的听力水平在生活中是完全够用的。要持续提升英文，记得点击订阅按钮。我们开始吧。
A dead crow on a fence once changed the way people talked about distance. Long before maps were clean and roads were straight, people had to guess how far a place was. A farmer might say the town was 2 days away by wagon. A sailor might say the island was 3 tides from shore. Distance was not a line on paper. It was sweat, mud, and tired feet. In Old England, fields were wide and open. Stone walls cut the land into shapes that did not make sense from the ground. A road could twist around a hill. A path could bend to avoid a river. If you walked from one village to the next, you might travel 10 miles even if the villages were only 6 miles apart in a straight line. Crows did not care about walls. They did not care about roads. They lifted off, black wings wide, and cut across sky and wind. If there was a tree with bright grain or a field with fresh seed, the crow did not follow the path made by men. It went straight. Sailors were some of the first to notice this in a serious way. At sea, there were no roads at all. A captain could not say he would turn left at the big oak tree. He had stars, wind, and his own skill. On land, people began to speak of distance not by the road, but by the air. There is a record from the 1700s where a land surveyor wrote about land that lay 3 miles as the crow flies. He meant that if you could rise above the trees and hedges, and move in a straight line, that was the true measure. It was not the safe way. It was not the easy way. It was the direct way. In small towns, the phrase grew from simple talk. 2 men at a market might argue over a horse farm. "It's near the river," one would say. "How near?" 5 miles as the crow flies. The other man would nod. He knew that meant closer than the road would show. He knew it meant the clean cut across field and stream. But there was a darker edge to the story. In some old tales, crows were seen as watchers. They gathered near battlefields. They waited on fence posts when storms were coming. If a crow flew from one hill to another, people felt it was carrying news, or even fate. So when someone said a place was so many miles as the crow flies, it carried a strange image. A black bird gliding over all that human trouble, untouched. One story from the north of England tells of a young man named Thomas who needed to reach his father before night fell. His father lay sick in a village beyond the marsh. The road went around the wet land and would take half a day. Thomas looked at the sky and saw a crow fly straight over the reeds, over the pools of dark water, and land near the far trees. Old men in the village had always said the marsh was not to be crossed. Too many had sunk into mud that looked solid. But Thomas thought about the crow. The bird did not sink. It did not fear the wet ground. It simply flew. Thomas could not fly. He knew that. Still, he took a rope and tied it around his waist. He walked into the marsh in as straight a line as he could. At one point, his boot sank deep. He felt the cold mud pull at him. His heart beat so hard he could hear it in his ears. He almost turned back. Then he saw another crow rise from the grass and head toward the trees. That small black shape became his guide. He moved step by step, testing each patch of ground. Hours later, soaked and shaking, he reached the far side. He made it to his father before the old man's last breath. The village never forgot that walk. They spoke of it as the day Thomas tried to go as the crow flies. Not all who tried were so lucky, but the phrase stuck. It meant bold. It meant direct. It meant cutting through fear. As maps became better, the phrase did not fade. In fact, it grew stronger. Surveyors used tools to measure straight lines over land. Railroads planned tracks that aimed for the shortest path between cities. Engineers talked about the straight line distance, the path a bird would take if it did not need to stop. Then came airplanes. When people began to fly, the idea of going as the crow flies was no longer just a saying. It became real. Pilots looked at charts and drew lines from one city to the next. They did not follow rivers or wagon trails. They crossed over mountains and fields in a clean path through the sky. There was a famous male pilot in the early days of air flight. He flew small bags of letters from one town to another. His plane shook in the wind. Snow often filled his view. One winter night, his fuel ran low. He had a choice. He could turn toward a safe field he knew, or he could keep his line straight to the town lights he saw far ahead. He thought of the maps he had studied. He thought of the line he had drawn with his finger. He pushed the plane forward. The engine coughed. The lights grew brighter. He landed hard, but safe, right at the edge of town. Later, when people asked how far he had flown in that storm, he said the miles were short as the crow flies, but long in the dark. The phrase holds both truth and tension. On paper, the straight line is simple. In real life, nothing is that simple. Hills rise. Rivers block the way. Rules, fear, and doubt twist our path. Yet the idea of the crow still pulls at us. When you look at a map on your phone and see the blue dot that marks your home, there is often a small note that tells you the distance in a straight line. It may say 8 miles. But the drive could be 15. Traffic lights, turns, and slow cars stretch it out. You feel it in your own life too. There is the dream that lies 5 years away as the crow flies. Clean, clear, direct. Then there is the real road, full of bends and stops. You may have to work jobs you do not love. You may have to study late at night. You may have to cross your own marsh of doubt. The crow does not ask for permission. It does not look for a road sign. It lifts into the air and trusts its wings. That does not mean you should rush into every swamp. Thomas almost paid with his life. The male pilot nearly ran out of fuel. The straight line can be brave, but it can also be hard and cold. Still, there is power in knowing the true distance between where you stand and where you want to be. Even if you must walk the long road, it helps to know the clean line in your heart. Next time you hear someone say a place is only a few miles as the crow flies, picture that black shape crossing the sky. Think about the walls it ignores. Think about the fields and rivers below it. Then ask yourself how far your goal is as the crow flies, and what it would take to rise, even for a moment, above the twists of the road. A dead crow on a fence once changed the way people talked about distance. A living crow in the sky can still change the way you see your own path.
能以非母语者的身份专注学习到现在，这本身就是很棒的进步。真诚感谢你的观看。如果你觉得本期内容实用，点赞或留言让我知道你的想法，这对我持续创作非常重要。我们下期见。